Glasgow Celtic's the most successful football club in the world. Yeah. Nobody can dispute that.
In 1967 in Lisbon, a homebred Glasgow team utterly outplayed Inter Milan, one of the most expensive football teams in Europe. Winning the European Cup made their name respected throughout the football world. Glasgow Celtic's style stunned those who hardly knew them. To the knowledgeable, their victory expressed a long tradition.
Had there been a choice between Cavaliers and Roundheads, we'd have certainly been the Cavaliers.
Billy McNeill will be up for this. There's McNeill to go!
The Celtics would probably go crazy if they went and seen their team playing with tight at the back and playing safe and creeping up. They like to see charge.
McPhail gets the ball, beats two defenders, lobs over Johnston, and it's a goal!
They're so courageous, they never say die. I mean, they always come up, they try until the last whistle, no matter what game they're playing.
A minute left. It's a tantalising one. Goals given. Walker is getting the congratulations.
Well, the only qualification you have to play here is, can you play football?
Right to McDonald. Dalglish. It's a great goal. Oh, absolutely superb.
It's not just a club or an establishment. It's a heritage. No, and you feel, well, you were only there as a caretaker of it.
Deans harassing Edwards and winning. Johnston, bit of a gap here through Spalding's legs. That's the way to take them. Jimmy Johnston with a real beauty.
This club will always be great, no matter who's involved in it, who's playing for them, who's the director, who's manager. It'll always be great, basically because of the fans and the traditions it had.
Through several generations, those traditions have come together into a single fabric, in which each Celtic fan is a thread. After 100 years, their commitment to their team shows no sign of wearing thin. They remain an inspiration to the players.
And he's swinging it round, that's a very good ball. Walker has done it. What a fine goal.
By the time of their centenary year, fans and players wanted an achievement that would match their pride in the club. Winning the Scottish League would have been enough for most, but Celtic were after the Scottish Cup as well.
The lower run this time, and McIlvanney!
The team of 1988 had done more than win the double of Scottish League and Scottish Cup. They had written another chapter in a continuing story of victory against the odds.
There's a fairy tale about this club, and I think tonight it's almost as if a fairy tale has once again come true. There's an ingredient with this club that you can't quite put into words. I think it goes back to the very early days that I think it was founded for the very right reasons, and I think those reasons have stayed with us.
The hardcore of the thousands who today fill Celtic Park with passion are descended from Irish immigrants in Glasgow in the late 19th century. They knew poverty and they knew hard industrial conditions. They were desperately underprivileged. They needed a focus of identity, a place to put their pride. The first Celtic team brought that pride into focus.
There was something immediately romantic about that these Irish people come to Scotland and they start a new life and they start a football club. I think it's magnificent. I think it goes right back to that. But for me, the biggest feeling about it is that we are an underdog. And I think, like every other underdog, we always like to enjoy the time when we have our day.
With the quick success of Celtic, that day became nearly every Saturday. Maris' brother Walford had helped found the club for charitable purposes. As well as Catholic affiliations, the club had political connections, represented by John Glass and Michael Davitt. But that it stood for something Scottish as well as Irish is shown by the name that was chosen for it.
And this was very much a reflection of the political debate in Glasgow and among the Scottish Irish at that time. And the real people behind Celtic, in political terms, were very much against this sort of exclusivist Irish Catholicism and very much more outward looking in the Irish political context, and that was reflected in the way Celtic was established.
The impressive modern stadium at Parkhead doesn't just serve as home for a football club. It says something about the nature of contemporary Scottishness. The crowds who come here demonstrate how the Irish immigrants of the 19th century have made a place for themselves in Scotland. The original ground was small and situated beside a cemetery. In 1892, a much more impressive stadium was built. As was said at the time, it was like moving from the graveyard to paradise. Like paradise, the new Celtic Park suggested a vision of a better future.
The people who formed this club looked very far ahead. At a time when the biggest gate was about 12,000, they built a ground to accommodate 70,000 people. I don't think we'd be as clever to look as far ahead as these people did in these days.
The modern Celtic fulfills the remarkable vision of those involved in the club's beginnings. The influence of men like James Kelly, a great player with the first team, haunts the club still. He and Tom Maley live on in the traditions they helped to create. In establishing these traditions, it was important that Celtic, in the first 50 years of its existence, had only one manager.
Willie Maley just happened to be in the house at the time, almost literally, and they said to him, "Why don't you come along as well?" Willie Maley was much more an athlete than a footballer, but the fact that he did become, as he wrote later, in the great scheme of things, just determined his life and Celtic's life, because for the next 50 years he was the manager.
A very gruff man sometimes. You walked in, he could shout at you, you know. How did you get in here, you know? And without a ticket. But he was an excellent manager.
The success of Willie Maley and Celtic made the club big business. In 1897 they ceased to be a purely charitable organisation and became a limited company. What the company produced was an unmistakable brand of fast attacking football that was to remain the hallmark of Celtic. It made them immediately popular, and the individual players became working class heroes. By 1899, when they won the Scottish Cup, the style of Celtic was already firmly established. It wouldn't change, although the strip would. Green and white hoops promised that a drab working week would finish with a flourish. Providing the flourish were men like Dan Doyle, who combined talent with a certain wildness. Alec McNair, alias the Icicle, a record 583 appearances for Celtic over 20 years. Players like that could make supporters try to break the record for the number of people you could get into a tram. Those supporters made Celtic big.
Football without fans is nothing. It can be the greatest game in the world. If there are no people there to watch it, it becomes nothing. Give an average game with a big crowd, excitement, atmosphere, this makes it a great game. The fans are the lifeblood of the game.
The early Celtic break clubs established the identification of fans with players that is at the heart of football's popularity. They also helped to make the immigrant Irish an integral part of Scottish life.
The reason I'm a Celtic supporter is because my father was one, and he told me a wee bit of the history of them, and it seemed a noble thing, and it was a nice thing to go and support. The Rangers supporters go and they find it a quintessentially Scottish thing, and aye, ready, and all that kind of stuff. But at Celtic Park, it's all based on charity in the first place, and we were all, well, Connolly, we're all Irish immigrant people coming down the line, but as we come down the line we're getting softer and softer, and I see myself more and more Scottish.
The total rejection of any religious bias in the signing of players helped to naturalise a team of Irish origins into a Scottish institution.
They talk about players 50 years ago as if they were still playing today, and they've never seen them play. Well, I talk about Celtic players I'd never seen play. You know, it's amazing.
One of the most talked about was a powerful centre forward who played in the team that, between 1905 and 1910, won 6 league titles in a row, Jimmy Quinn.
After what my father had told me, this great guy, the mighty Quinn bursting through legions of people, here, there and everywhere, scoring the magnificent goals, all the knocks and blows he took. I used to think that Celtic were in a war every week instead of playing football. However, it was lovely, but to see that great man, and the shoulders must have been immense in his playing day. As soon as I signed for Celtic, I remember getting an invitation out to Croy to old Jimmy's house. He said, "Would you like a medal, son?" "Oh, would I like a medal, son? Imagine old man being in my position." He comes over with a tin. I'm sure it could have been a biscuit tin, could have been anything. Pours them all over the table. He says, "Take your choice, And it was this humility in a man who'd won so many honours in his life, had done so many great things.
As late as 1937, he remained a part of living history. Folk memory has transformed other Celtic players into legendary figures, like Patsy Gallacher of the 1913-14 double-winning team. His first appearance had become folklore.
He ran onto the park, a wee guy, 5'5.5", 6.5 stone, jersey hanging about a foot below his arms. The crowd laughed at him, but I understand he scored a hat-trick and that shut him up pretty quick.
Well, he was such a wonderful player. I mean, you couldn't keep your eye off him. I mean, he took command of the whole field when he was playing.
I have a sore toe I got from Patsy Gallacher, I may tell you. Tramped on my foot purposely. Go up to head a ball, and of course, being taller, I could get it. He wasn't, but he made sure I didn't get up to it.
My father was the first person I ever heard use that description, retaliate first.
The stories about the man the fans called simply Patsy are legion. He had the great player's ability to take the often chaotic ebb and flow of a football match and crystallise it into memorable moments, stamped with his personal style. One of those moments came in the 1925 Cup final against Dundee.
My father did one of his usual performing tricks and beat 4 or 5 players and was stopped about a yard from the goal line. And it was felt then that the danger was over. But he somersaulted into the back of the net with the ball between his feet, and that was equaliser.
Celtic went on to win. Patsy Gallacher was a man who could be ironic. After his death, the irony continues. In the 1988 Scottish Cup final, his grandson Kevin demonstrated that not all Gallacher goals are occasions for Celtic to rejoice.
Just maybe rubbed off his legs into my legs, so hopefully I'd like touch wood on that, but I think it's maybe came down, dropped on one for me.
My father bought shares from the great Jimmy Quinn. When he left Celtic that season, he had a bad ankle. And he's at the shareholders meeting, and willy-nilly announced with deep regret to the shareholders of Celtic that Patsy Gallacher was no longer able to play and would be finishing up his career. And I'm told by people who were at the meeting that my father jumped up to his feet and said, "Who the hell told you that?" and played another 5 years for Falkirk.
When the past is replayed in the memory of Celtic fans, no matter how many names are conjured up, one that will always be the occasion of a pause for admiration and respect is Jimmy McGrory. Like Jimmy Quinn, McGrory was a great example of the centre forward as spearhead. He harried and hustled tirelessly. He was a hair shirt to any defender who came up against him. A goal he scored in the 1924 Glasgow Cup final against Rangers was in one way typical.
Jimmy wasn't that great with his feet, but he made up for it with his heading ability. I mean, if they hit a ball 20 yards out, it went in like a bullet. You think it came from his boot. He hit it that hard. It was the best header of all ever was.
When the compliment comes from a player of Jimmy Delaney's quality, it means all the more. Having played alongside him, he knows how hard the places were where Jimmy McGrory had to go to get his goals. But he sustained his adventurousness and his commitment to Celtic through a long career. The record shows he not only took the blows, but put away 550 goals in first-class football, a total still unequalled in Britain. In the memory, he seems to hang perpetually in the air, heading the ball past goalkeepers from almost any angle. The man perhaps most lovingly remembered of all was a miner from Cardenden in Fife, John Thompson. He was a goalkeeper who was utterly fearless at a time when goalkeepers had a lot more to fear than they do today. He was sporting and graceful and gracious. Those who saw him knew what they were seeing.
He seemed to have every aspect that a goalkeeper should have. He had agility, he had anticipation, he had almost everything you could think of. I mean, he could anticipate where a man was going to put the ball. All this, everything. And that's what makes a good goalkeeper. Positioning.
His courage was always likely to put him in danger. In his early 20s, he played his last game for Celtic. His determination to go where the ball was, regardless of risk, resulted in a tragic accident. Sam English collided innocently with the young goalkeeper. John Thompson froze like a statue. As much as he had been loved, so deeply was he grieved for.
I remember we came out really shattered. It lasted the whole evening. And I can remember the next morning my father got dressed and telling my mother, John Thompson's dead. It was like one of the family had gone. It lasted for quite a few days, this empty feeling.
Those who never had the privilege of seeing him can judge the quality of the man from the intensity of that affection. Thousands attended his funeral in Cardenden, where his monument still stands. Greatness in football is a gift that only the crowd can bestow. No matter what technical skills a player may have, he only becomes great by evoking spontaneous tribute from thousands of throats. The tributes John Thompson evoked reverberate down the years to reach Celtic fans who never saw him. There was one striking measure at the time of the respect in which he was held. His death sent the disease of sectarianism, which had emerged from the rivalry between Rangers and Celtic, into remission, however briefly. His name lives on as one of the most admired in Celtic's history, an inspiration to those who came after him. The emptiness left by his death has filled with pride in what he was. Just as the history of the club is connected with certain names, it is also associated with certain places. Seamel Hydro on the Ayrshire coast is where successive generations of Celtic teams have come to prepare for special matches. It is a suitable background against which to prompt the memory of two Celtic players of the 30s. Malky MacDonald, a player whose comprehensive skills allowed him to be fielded in any position, and his friend of many years, outside right Matt Lynch.
The first team I remember, without necessarily seeing them, was Shawmell, Nairn and Dodge, Young, Loney and Hay, Benham, Manny, McQuinn, Summers and Hamilton. But the team that I remember first would be Thompson, Cook, McGonigal, Wilson, McStay and Geetons, Thompson, McGrory, Scarf and Napier. I remember seeing them regularly as a fan.
And obviously the ease with which you can say it testifies to how you enjoyed them.
Oh, that's a litany.
Is that the same, Mark? Is that the same for you? Do you have...
Well, the team that Matt quoted, I came in that was my first. Peter Scarf, he quoted, no, it was one exception. John Thompson had been killed and Joe Kennaway came. So the team I was Kennaway, Cook, McGonigal, Wilson, McStay, Geetons, Thompson, McGrory, Napier and myself. I got a game at outside left. No, there must have been a man short, so I got a game at outside.
And you scored 2 goals in your first game.
I did.
Against Johnny Jackson.
Well, they said we had a good forward line, and it all emanated from a wee fella called John Crum. And I think again the success was because it was a different pattern, because previously the patterns had always been centre forwards as how would you, spearheads. Well, Jimmy McGrory and Jimmy Quinn were the previous ones. They were spearheads with wingers doing things. And this was a totally different thing altogether. We didn't have a spearhead. We had Jimmy Delaney and we had John Crum. And John Crum was the fella who made us because his positional play was phenomenal. No. And there was nothing rehearsed. As I said, everything emanated for this wee fella John Crum. John was as fly on the field as he was off the field.
To the joy of the fans, the flyness paid off. Celtic beat Aberdeen 2-1 to win the Scottish Cup. It was Celtic's 15th cup victory, and the delight on the faces of the goal scorers, Willie Buchan and Johnny Crum, reflected the feelings of the supporters. A record crowd of 146,433 had turned up at Hampden for the match. The hard times of the 30s didn't prevent the Celtic support from turning out. They turned out too for the football competition that was staged to commemorate the Empire Exhibition of 1938. Having already won the Glasgow International Exhibition Trophy of 1902, Celtic were looking for a unique double. They met Everton in the final, hoping for the replica of Tate's Tower that would go to each player in the winning team. Jimmy Delaney recovered from injury in time to displace Matt Lynch at outside right. Celtic beat Everton 1-0 and showed they had a team at that time the equal of anything in Britain.
Well, I mean, we had a great understanding. Johnny Crum was very tricky when he was playing centre forward. Malcolm McDonald was one of these boys who could hold the ball, you didn't. And you didn't need beat men. Malcolm beat them for you, but he gave you the pass, and you had nothing else to do, only cross it. And it was the same with Johnny Divers. He ran it in a great position. He was a great header of the ball too. Frank Murphy. Frank was a great direct player, a great winger. Could shoot and pull out lovely crosses. We had a great forward line. We had a great team. To me, it was the best Celtic team ever I played in. The best Celtic team ever I played.
The quality of the team was confirmed by the winning of their 19th Scottish League and their 15th Scottish Cup. In their 50th year, Celtic had demonstrated that they could recapture the flair with which they had begun. It was a flair that would eventually lead them to the European Cup.
The club gave a big dinner in the Grosvenor in Garden Street. Nobody except the shareholders were allowed. You know, it was lovely, the gents on the dinner jackets and the ladies on the lovely long uniform. That's gone, do you not think so?
Perhaps it left with those who went to fight the Second World War. That was one event to which everybody was invited. The game went on at home, but serious league football was in abeyance. From 1940 to 45, Jimmy McStay took over from Willie Maley as manager. He would be replaced after the war by Jimmy McGrory. And in 1947, the power in the boardroom shifted to new chairman Bob Kelly. As always, through even the lean times, the Celtic tradition stayed alive in great individual players. The post-war Celtic didn't achieve much, but a player emerged who electrified the fans. His name became a reason to watch Celtic wherever they were playing.
As Tully scores the winning goal.
My biggest hero at Celtic Park when I was a kid was Charlie Tully, and to go and play with Charlie for a little period of time was fantastic because he was a genius, you know, and he was so bright at the game and so intelligent. And one of the great factors, and I think Jock realised it at that time as well, if you've got a team of young kids, put an experienced player in amongst them, you learn more from that experienced player than you would learn from someone talking to you from now until doomsday. And Charlie was stand there, go there, and pushing you all over the place, and you thought, great, he's right, you know. It was always the right things he was telling you to do.
Charlie was my hero because he sat on the ball. He was the first ever who sat on the football waiting for the opposition. And playing Falkirk, he did 2 in-swingers. The curved ball, which 2 World Cups ago it was the big breakthrough, the curved ball. Charlie was doing it in the 50s. From a corner kick, boof, into the net, disallowed, take it again, whack, goal.
Although we didn't win major honours for a couple of years after Charlie came, in the interim he seemed to bring a fire and a hunger from the fans and the players to the business entirely. And we're breaking gates all over the country, you know, with sheer charisma of Tully and entertainment. And then we did finally get the breakthrough.
McPhail gets the ball, beats 2 defenders, lobs over Johnstone, and it's a goal. And here's Celtic with the cup, their 16th success, and that's something to be proud about.
In 1953, Celtic continued their habit of winning one-off competitions. Having beaten Arsenal and Manchester United, they went on to victory in the final of the Coronation Cup against Hibernian by 2-0. Mochen and Walsh were the scorers. Playing as captain that day, was a man Celtic had brought back to Scotland from Llanelli. His influence over the club's future was destined to be decisive. His name was Jock Stein. The success of his earliest associations with the club could be seen as prophetic. Like a lot of players who successfully make the transition to being managers, his awareness of his own limitations made him an impressive reader of a game.
I was fairly good in the air, nothing more. I was good in the air, and at that time Celtic needed someone there. There were good players round about me. I wasn't a bad positional player, but I wasn't exceptional as a player now. Just ordinary, very ordinary.
Jock didn't take any prisoners. It was as simple as that. He used everything he had, hands, knees and bumps of daisy.
Jock Stein's ability to improvise did Celtic no harm at all. In 1954 he helped them to a 2-1 victory over Aberdeen in the Scottish Cup final.
And into the Dons net. A tragedy for Aberdeen, but one up for Celtic. McIlvanney tapped the ball to Fallon, who completed the move by scoring goal number 2. This cup victory gave Celtic their first double in 40 years. A great contest between two of the pluckiest teams who fought it out right to the final whistle.
Just about that time, there's a great affinity with Jock and Bob Kelly. I think possibly because both of them were from Lanarkshire. And then, having won the Scottish Cup, the chairman went round everywhere with the cup, visiting all the clubs, and Jock used to go with him. And there was great friendship.
In 1956, Celtic contested the League Cup final against Partick Thistle. Billy McPhail's first goal gave rise to celebrations that were understandable. This would be Celtic's first League Cup if they won. McPhail's second goal brought that long-awaited prospect nearer. The match proceeded without a reply from Partick Thistle, and a final goal from Bobby Collins made the game history. It was the only major trophy to be collected by a great Celtic captain, much loved by the fans.
There used to be a man up in the stand who'd go every Saturday go, Bobby Evans. It'd take about 10 minutes. And you could, if you turned around, you could never see him. It was like a cuckoo, you know, you could hear him. Bobby Evans. There was ships in the Clyde going, fog lads, batting hatches, you know.
Bobby Evans, a guy that you could never seem to get past, although you thought you were past him. His wee toe used to come down and nick the ball away from you. He was a very clean player too. Bertie Peacock from Kildare. Bertie always come in with a peeled orange in his pocket, you know, and when I used to play against him in the old days, you know, he'd always give you a bit of the orange before, when the game, just as it was starting, but you know, that was all he gave away after that, you know. He was a great wee guy. Fairly magnificent specimen, the finest build of a football player I've ever met. I've never seen a physique like his. Absolutely perfect, beautiful thighs, beautiful shoulders. Most football players are all legs and thin body. But he had everything. And then nearly the Mochen, the cannonball kid as we used to call him, he had the most fantastic shot, and he used to get into the habit of running along the byline and shooting them just underneath the crossbar, just inside the net. He had a marvellous knack for that.
But the undoubted talent didn't prevent the club from being overshadowed at this stage by Rangers. When defeat was sauced with sectarianism, it didn't help the taste.
Bono was sitting one day at half-time in the dressing room at the Rangers game at Parkhead, and we were getting beaten at half-time, and Bono was sitting with his head in his hands like this, and the boss, Jimmy McGrory, always tried to keep us all buoyed up all the time, and he said, "What's the matter, John?" "Oh," John said, "did you not hear that crowd at our boss?" He says, "They're really sickening. They called me a papish so-and-so." Oh, I said, "What are you talking about? Don't worry about that." I said, "They called me that too." John says, "I know, but you are one." I thought it was lovely.
Because of the intensity of their rivalry, the success of Glasgow Celtic tended to be measured against the failure of Glasgow Rangers. A goal in one of their games was likely to be celebrated like 3 in any other. After Celtic's first goal from Wilson in the 1957 League Cup final, few could have foreseen that it was the letting of the first blood in what was to be a slaughter. The second goal from Neely Mochen hinted at what was to come.
Everyone played it as a team, but I think it was the fact, you know, of our wingers keeping the back so square that left the gap. In fact, you could have got a circus through the middle of the Rangers' defence on that particular day. But Fanny was outstanding. He just run them ragged after the ragged. Peacock had an outstanding game. Of course, when the team gets on top, everyone seems to play well.
It was the second half before the superiority of Celtic on the day began to promise something more than just their second League Cup trophy. By the time a high ball came into the penalty area for Billy McNeill to head his own first goal and Celtic's third, the team was ready to go on the rampage. Rangers came back at them, but a headed goal from Simpson was as effective in stemming the tide as Kincanute had been. Celtic were confident enough to shoot at any sight of goal. The best the Rangers goalkeeper could do was delay the inevitable. Billy McNeill provided it. Celtic 4, Rangers 1. And still they came on. Celtic's fifth was taken by Nearly Mochan in typical style. The Rangers' defence was in a state of collapse. Billy McNeill was to score the sixth for his hat-trick. Celtic weren't finished. They would add a seventh for the biggest win in a senior cup competition final.
The last one at the penalty, I got up first, the four of us went down and I got up first and I ran through and as I was coming into the penalty area, the big right back, a big beefy fella playing at right back for Rangers, he just ran straight into me, put me up there. And Charlie was shouting, "Come on, nobody else has scored 4 goals, Billy." I said, no, really funny.
Celtic's victory became for their fans instantly historic. But as Bertie Peacock arrived to collect his only major trophy as Celtic's captain, another kind of history was only a decade away. The players who would help to make that history were soon coming up through the ranks. The man who would mastermind it was coaching them, establishing a relationship that would bring the club its greatest triumph.
I got a bad ankle injury here, which was possibly the best thing that happened to me. An ankle injury which bothers me even yet. And I was conveniently pushed in to look after the reserve team. Maybe it would just create a job that was created for me, but it turned out good for Celtic and it turned out good for me, but at that particular time it turned out good for Celtic because we had to start a new reserve team to build towards the future.
Oh, he was a warm fella. I mean, Jock loved football, he lived for it, you know, and just he was crazy about football. I mean, you spoke to him, you had a realisation about you that he was talking a little bit of sense. And then when you get involved in football for a period of time, you realise that he was the one that did make sense.
For the first time, we started working with balls. I mean, Big Jock was basically simple in his attitude to things. He allowed people to express themselves and allowed people to enjoy themselves. And he did that in the football and the tactics idea as well, that within a framework, he wanted people to express themselves.
During the Scottish Cup semi-final in 1961, Celtic showed how they could express themselves. In a 4-0 victory over Airdrie, they played the traditional attacking football, opening with a goal from John Hughes. It was the kind of play that had kept their fans with them through all the bad times. They were not to win the final, but a further goal from Hughes suggested what they were capable of. The crowd wanted more. More came from Stevie Chalmers and Willie Fernie, reminding the support that their team had the players to achieve more than they had done so far, and other exciting prospects were coming through.
Jimmy Johnstone. I saw the first game Jimmy Johnstone ever played for Celtic. It was in well, I'm sure it was the first. It was a Scottish Cup tie. And this wee red-haired man ran on, and everybody knew his name, but nobody had seen him. I went, my God, what's that? It was a wee miniature Bobby Evans.
Sullivan towering above him. Now you see why Celtic decided to play this little boy today.
The achievement didn't always match the talent, but the promise was there in abundance.
McNamee taking the throw to Divers. Mackay clearing. Murdoch coming through, and here's Hughes. Hughes should score. Oh, but Murdoch. I said right, Johnstone. Nice bit of forward play.
By 1963, Celtic were proving that they had players with the talent to make their mark in Europe. In the 3-0 victory over Dynamo Zagreb, Stevie Chalmers scored 2 goals. Elenio Herrera of Inter Milan should have been watching. All Celtic needed was someone with the vision and skill to harness the talent they were producing.
all of a sudden it's 1965 and I'm 25 and I'm married, I've got a family, and nothing was happening. The club didn't seem to be going in any definite direction. And then all of a sudden, Big Jock came back and we won the cup in 65. Bertol scored 2 goals and I scored the winning goal, which was tremendous, and that opened up a whole new era for us. I mean, that was the first time I'd ever seen the dramatic reaction from Celtic fans. They were so relieved and so happy that something at last was happening.
What was happening was that Celtic were entering the greatest era so far in the club's history. Jock Stein was back, after spells as manager of Dunfermline and Hibernian. His assistant at Celtic Park was to be Sean Fallon.
We put our heads together. There was no problems. They thought I'd be annoyed. I was supposed to be earmarked for the managership at that time. But a better man couldn't have got the job, as he proved.
I think that everything, you just had something. He was supremely confident. We just knew that anything he did was right. It was the best thing that happened to Celtic.
More than one Kelly had that hope.
The whole nature of the operation at Celtic Park changed with the arrival of Jock Stein. For a start, Bob Kelly ceased to pick the team. I think that Kelly was enough of a real football man to realise that the best thing he could do for the club he loved was to get the most powerful personality, the most powerful football mind available to Celtic. He got Jock Stein, and he realised instantly that Jock Stein would be running the football side of the club.
Well, I didn't think it would work because Celtic had never, I don't think I have ever worked really with a manager having full say. But I was assured that I'd be given full control of the side and full control. But I didn't want to be told that I would get full control. I'm no use of getting full control if you're not able to get it. What I wanted to do was to prove to the people I was capable of taking full control.
At the first Thursday night session after Jock took over, he made it plain to the board that there were just too many problems. There was an injury here and a cold there, and it wouldn't be possible to name the team until just before the match. And Bob Kelly said, in other words, you're telling us to mind our own business. And Jock said, well, that's about the size of it.
In his first full season as manager, Jock Stein's team served notice in Europe that Celtic were coming. Though they would lose the semi-final of the European Cup Winners' Cup to Liverpool in the second leg, Celtic won the first game.
Inside forward Lennox. After 7 minutes of the second half, Celtic won, Liverpool 0.
Season 1966-67 was to be the one. The defeat of Rangers in the League Cup final was only the beginning.
Lots of people think that if they win the 2 Rangers games, Celtic supporters may feel that if you win the 2 Rangers games, that's all that matters. That's not important anymore as far as I'm concerned. You just get the same 2 points for beating Aberdeen or Hibs or Hearts or Airdrie or Kilmarnock as you do for beating Rangers.
The potential of the team from the East End of Glasgow was growing beyond parochialism to match the vision of one of the most brilliant pragmatists in the history of club football. But as well as looking abroad, they attended to business at home. Willie Wallace's first goal against Aberdeen strengthened the conviction among Celtic supporters that this was to be their season. The conviction grew as the game went on. Wallace's second goal guaranteed that the Scottish Cup was coming to Celtic Park. Confidence was high that there was more success to come. The omens were good, that Billy McNeill would become more practiced in lifting trophies.
I like the players I'm working with. The directors I work with are very good as well, so I've got no complaints. And the most important thing is, I like the people who support us. I like to see them getting a bit of success. And I'm egotistical enough to think that if I'm here, I'll have reasonable success anyway. Maybe wrong in that, but quite happy with it.
He wasn't wrong. Celtic clinched the league title, drawing 2 each with Rangers. That success might have satisfied the Celtic fans, but Jock Stein saw a larger destiny for the team. To realise his dream of a Celtic beyond domestic success, all his skills would be necessary.
He was able to deal with very sophisticated players, of whom he had several, and he was able to deal with sort of wild eccentrics like Jimmy Johnstone. and he dealt with each one individually. Got the best out of them, but always thought of the performance as a team performance. Teams at their best played in a Celtic way. They were unmistakably Celtic teams. They played with verve. They just tore the opposition apart. When they were right, when they weren't, they would fiddle around and try to hold their ground until they felt better about themselves.
In season 1966-67, Celtic always felt better about themselves. When Dukla Prague came to Celtic Park in the semi-final of the European Cup, Celtic refused to be intimidated by the occasion. After Jimmy Johnstone scored the first, Celtic showed that they were mature enough to cope with the setbacks.
Dukla suddenly putting on pressure. And he scored, Shrimp has scored to make it 1 goal each, just on half-time. Sent forward all. Murdoch. Johnston.
But Celtic were not to be denied. 2 goals from that marvellously economical striker Willie Wallace would see them through. They would gain a 0-0 each draw in Prague and reach the final of the European Cup, the first British team to do so.
Wallace. To Murdoch. Oh, 25 minutes to go. Head forward all. And it's a goal for Wallace!
The dream was becoming reality.
Well, I think like every other club, the European Cup must be everyone in Scotland's ambition, particularly as no Scottish team has ever reached the final even. But I think this is a big dream. I think it would be a tremendous performance for any club to do so.
When they beat Inter Milan in Lisbon, the glory of it was that they did it in a way that represented all the best traditions of Celtic, but they also represented the way Stein had always felt about the game. We know they're a better team technically, he said, and if we give them a chance to exploit that technical superiority, he said, we've got terrific players, he said, but I'm saying that as a collection of 11 guys, they're probably superior technically. He said, but he said, we'll do things at such speed that by the time they find out we've made one mistake, we'll be doing something else. He said, and we'll keep doing it. And of course, they play them off the park.
But winning European Cups doesn't come easy. Being already underdogs, a lesser team than Celtic might have been buried when they conceded a penalty early in the game. A lot of pundits must already have been reading the writing on the wall.
Celtic in that first half played them to death and could easily have been broken by that very sense of superiority with which they went into the dressing room at half-time, because they thought, if we play like that and we're still 1-0 down, what can we do? And apparently Jock said to them, you're doing everything right, don't want you to change anything except this thing about putting the ball across a wee bit earlier.
Tommy Gemmell's goal announced the triumph of adventurousness over caution. Inter Milan had staked everything on defence. They must have known already that the bet was lost. The hunger and the fitness of Celtic wore them down. Time and again Inter were left to depend on an inspired goalkeeper. Celtic played with relentless spirit, chased every loose ball. Only one team deserved to win. By the time Stevie Chalmers had scored the second, Celtic had massacred Inter Milan 2-1.
The scoreline was 2-1, but in effect, if you look at it, and I've watched it thousands of times, that we should have won by 4 or 5 in actual fact. It was only for the brilliance of the goalkeeper, Sarty, who incidentally we thought might have been a weak link before the game, you know, and he had an outstanding game.
Those who streamed onto the park after the match, like those who danced in front of television sets back home, had gone beyond sectarianism. They were celebrating an expression of Scottishness.
It sounds over-romantic, but when Jock got a Scottish team to play like that, he was, in a sense, saying that someone like himself, who had spun round the close poles in the Miners' Rows in Lanarkshire when he was playing in the kick-around matches at first, that he would show Helenia Herrera and all the sophisticates of European football that people coming from that background could do the job in them.
The job had been done, and the people on whose behalf it had been done weren't short of appreciation. But they remained the home-and-away decider for the World Club Championship against Racing Club of Buenos Aires.
I think it's a unique occasion for Scottish football. It may be many a long day before we have the same type of match in Scotland again, or in fact in Britain again, because people don't seem to realise to participate in this, you must first of all win the European Cup, which is not so easy.
It didn't prove to be so easy playing against Racing Club either. When Jimmy Johnstone was subjected to not so much a tackle as an attempt at assassination, it began to look as if Celtic should be playing in green and white armour.
Here's the goalkeeper out taking part in it. He was supposed to be injured.
But occasional moments of football broke out among the mayhem.
It's to be tripped now. I think the ball was over the line. No, the linesman's giving a corner. McNeill, that's a goal by McNeill. McNeill has scored.
Celtic won 1-0, but the most obvious result was that the return leg in Argentina would be a settling of scores that had nothing to do with football.
It's Martin, the captain. Oh, and all's done as though he'd been poleaxed.
Racing Club beat Celtic 2-1 in Buenos Aires. In that game, Ronnie Simpson had been carried off before a ball was kicked. Round 3, or the playoff, was fixed for Montevideo in Uruguay. The preliminaries were ceremonious and polite and formal, but then presumably so is the signing of a declaration of war. There was a lot of passion around. It wasn't destined to find itself fulfilled by the football. For a time Celtic played well enough and they had their chances, but the atmosphere around them in the stadium must have made them feel besieged by antagonism. Even the few fans they had with them felt under threat. Racing Club would win 1-0, but the game was not so much a matter of the final scoreline as just waiting for when the lighted fuse would reach the powder keg. The game was a disaster for Celtic. Riot police were called in twice to restore order on the field. All Celtic won was the sending off tally. 4 players from Celtic, 2 from Racing Club. Bob Kelly, who hadn't wanted to play the game in the first place, was deeply saddened. Like everybody else at Celtic Park, Jock Stein was hurt by the experience, but he was also looking to the future. The impressive talents he had welded into the winners of the European Cup were still in full flow. To the fans, they had a lot of pleasure to give yet. They would outmaneuver many more defences before they were finished. They would score many more goals, as if it was a habit they didn't know how to break. Other trophies were waiting.
All taking this. It's a good one. There's McNeill. Murdoch's up there. Wallace, a goal!
That's the one thing that people don't realise about Celtic. They had 2 of the best midfield players you could have wished in Bertie Auld and Bobby Murdoch at that particular time. And if you get 2 great midfield players, you've got a chance of winning anything. Because great forwards can play all day, but if they don't get the service, they're a waste of time to you. That's the most important factor, is to have great midfield players. And Bobby and Bertie were brilliant. Brilliant players.
And Bertie wasn't exactly a bum tackler either, was he?
Gentleman.
Here's all. There's a beautiful pass to Lennox. He must score. He has.
When I played once for Celtic at Liverpool, I think it was for Ronnie Yeats' testimonial, and I felt that Bobby Lennox read me to a T, did. And I think he ran through on his own and scored about 3 or 4 goals that particular day against Liverpool. And I came off and I said to Jock Stein afterwards, I said, I would have liked to have had him in my pocket everywhere I went, you know. I thought he was a superb striker who I would put down as probably one of the best strikers that I've ever seen. And I don't say that lightly, having seen a lot of really good striking players. He was brilliant.
Now Johnstone, everybody retreating to the penalty area, and up comes Craig. Bad one by Craig's a goal! A bad cross, but it worked out well for him eventually. Number 6.
A 6-2 victory over Hibs in the League Cup final of 1969 told the fans that the spirit of the Lisbon Lions was still intact.
We were a team on the park and a team off the park. We had the characters that could give you entertainment, and there were never ever any strain on you. But here again, this comes with winning. And even the backroom staff, Neil Mochan and Sean Fallon, see, they were characters in their own right. They had played the game at the highest level. And if at any time you felt as if you were having a bad game, there were so many good players about you that they could carry you, you know. That was a fabulous team. It wasn't were you going to win, it was how many are you going to win by at Celtic Park at that time.
As usual, Billy McNeill will be up for this. There's McNeill to go! A goal by McNeill as the Rangers defend. Absolutely flat, brilliantly taken by McNeill. Look at this hesitancy. Here's Lennox, almost with a gift. It's a goal by Lennox. Number 2 for Celtic, Lennox the scorer. Old. Smith with them. And it goes to Lennox again. Nearly number 3.
One of the sadnesses of that era was that the talent of George Connolly was to be lost to Celtic when he quit the game.
What a chance for Connolly to go! A goal by Connolly! And no wonder, McKinnon's hanging on the net. There's Connolly! Go offside. McKinnon appealing for offside, but no. Here's Chalmers. It's a great goal by Chalmers.
It made success in Europe a wee bit more difficult because we were open, and the Continentals are that bit more patient than we were, and that bit less expressive. They tended to hit on the break, whereas we wanted to play pushing forward for the full 90 minutes. And it really, I think it speaks volumes for the quality of the players and the quality of the team that we did get success in a style that the Continentals in actual fact love to play against. But we had appetite and determination, pride, everything, skill, the whole thing, fitness. I think few teams could really have ever copied it.
Tommy Gemmell, what a shot! Oh, that was a goal to match the one he scored in Lisbon in 1967.
In 1969, it began to look as if the Lisbon experience could be repeated.
Oh, fantastic save! That was very nearly number 2. Jim Craig. Hood and Wallace between them. 4 defenders coming back, but Wallace. It's a goal! Possible angle! This is number 2. Hughes. Motherton marked in the middle. Wallace. Blocked. Wallace across field again. Celtic still in possession. Jim Craig. Johnstone. Again Craig attacking from behind. Old. Fierce Celtic attack.
The eventual 3-0 victory would be pulled back by Benfica, but Celtic would win on the toss of a coin. They would then beat Fiorentina and be in the semi-final.
Still keeping it in play. Appeal for a penalty turned down. Craig, Murdoch.
I remember picking up the phone at Celtic Park and supporters were phoning in saying, what's the draw? And I said, we get Leeds United. And he went, oh no. And that was the attitude. I mean, every day we were told that Leeds United were invincible, and then we beat them home and away in the semi-final.
It's obviously going to be a game for brave men.
The second leg of what had been dubbed the Battle of Britain took place at Hampden.
Brenda's got it! And Billy Brenda has done it for Leeds. Celtic now had 7 corners. Leeds hadn't had one. 7 minutes gone in the second half. That kind of injury time. 1 each. Hunter.
Scottish case of climbing the mountain and then falling over the hill that's at the top of it. The shape of the club today is about Jock Stein, because he brought it from being a club with proud traditions and great past into a club with a tremendous present, and he made them into the European giants that we became, no doubt about that whatsoever. But he and the rest of us underestimated Feyenoord. They were a much, much better side, and we were conned, and maybe they conned us, but certainly we fell for it.
But the Lisbon Lions remain the team that has represented most dramatically the Celtic tradition, the heart of which is pride. It is a pride that remains well-founded today after 100 years of competition. 35 Scottish League titles, 28 Scottish Cups, 9 Scottish League Cups, the Glasgow International Exhibition Trophy 1902, the Empire Exhibition Trophy 1938, the Victorian Europe Cup 1945, the St Mungo Cup 1951, the Coronation Cup 1953, the European Cup 1967. Jock Stein and his players translated Glasgow Celtic into an expression that is understood anywhere in the football world. The wisdom of Bob Kelly and that appointment he made in 1965 has given his club its greatest achievements.
Bob Kelly was great. He was a great man. Bob Kelly, he was a man that led the road for the players and the Celtic supporters are enjoying just now.
Get to the fight. Come on, lad. Come on. Come on, get them through here. Come on.
There's always been instilled into us, in my time, that it's important how you played. In fact, I remember getting a bonus, even though we were beaten, which is most unusual, for the manner in which we played, which was very important to Bob Kelly, who was chairman at that time. He said that was far more important, the manner in which you play and the manner in which you accept defeat.
But under Stein, Celtic were still more concerned about inflicting defeat, and they were bringing on the players to do it.
Young McCarry, who has made it. Celtic 1, Rangers 0 after 23 and a half minutes. Callaghan. And Celtic with lots of room to move. Jackson doing a good job of stopping him. Jackson to rescue again. Callaghan. Rangers defence a bit bemused just now as Johnson got right in, pulled down as a penalty. He's a penalty, McKinnon. Well, there's good spirit. And there is 2-0 for Celtic.
Their team consisted of Lou McCarry, David Hay, Josh Conley, young boy Dalglish, I think. He played for us. And we had a great team. We were nicknamed the Quality Street Gang. And we grew up together and we all learnt from each other as well. But I say basically training with these Lisbon Lions was a great learning centre for us.
The supply of great strikers seemed endless.
With it. It scores a goal by Deans. Ball coming off his arm, but Brownlee just getting to that, or does he? Deans it's in for a chance. Must be a goal. No. He scored. Deans has scored number 3. What a Rock fighting hard, but again you see somebody at the back for Celtic. And Deans is onside. Great chance for Deans as a goal.
Well, there was nothing more than I liked doing, well, is getting the crowd going and chanting your name and running to the jungle and when you scored a goal. Or, you know, you got up to be things on the field of play too. Maybe the referee didn't see, the crowd had seen it, you know, such as the old Elba going and that, you know. Used to get a lot of that nowadays. But that was, I loved it, and I know I gave the crowd a lot of fun, and they certainly lifted me on a Saturday.
There was also Kenny Dalglish, the most successful Scottish player of all time.
Can get going, but here's Dixie Deans. It's a better looking ball. There's Harry Hood with a chance. It must be. Harry Hood. Trying to get the 1-2. There's a chance. Johnstone. And it's there. Steve Murray eventually finishing it off. It could have gone in before that. Jimmy Johnstone.
The Scottish Cup would go to Celtic for the 23rd time.
A quiet afternoon. And there's a beautiful ball to Kenny Dalglish. Great chance for Dalglish. Here's Dixie Deans. It must be. It's there.
The quality in the field appears to have gone right through the club.
My favourite place up there was the tea room because there's lots of lovely little women working there. Believe me, I wouldn't. If I got to Celtic Park tomorrow, I wouldn't go into the boardroom. I mean, I'll go in there because it's great fun, and I talk to people and they make lovely cups of tea, and they sort the thing with hot sauce is beautiful. The pie is fabulous. You don't get them here in England.
In 1974, when Celtic beat Hibernian 6-3, Dixie Deans became the only player to score hat-tricks in both Scottish Cup and League Cup finals.
Steve Murray. Dixie Deans coming, well, what a chance for Deans! Dixie Deans the scorer. There's Wilson, Jimmy Johnson, a whip fly. Oh, what a goal! And well may they hug Dixie Deans again.
Billy McNeill was there to lift the trophy. His contribution to Celtic as a player had been immense.
Nobody ever played more effectively, with more sense of what was required, with more conviction about the worth of what they were up to. You know, Billy believed all that and was a perfect captain and a great complementary force in relation to Stein.
That force continued into 1975, abetted by newer players.
Oh, Wilson! There's Lennox with it. That's a good goal! Paul Wilson! Lennox, look at him go! This must be a penalty. Penalty kick. And McCluskey with it. There it is! 3-1 for Celtic.
That's your man. Ted, that's your man, Bobby Murder.
The Airdrie Cup final had been Billy McNeill's last game for Celtic. He had experienced how Jock Stein had transformed the club, becoming at the same time a formidable presence in world football. Like most strong natures, he lived on his own terms and would judge his achievement on those terms when the time came.
I think maybe wrongly at times, we feel we haven't been maybe appreciated or recognised in the south the way we should have been, but it's not really important. They play their game, a different game from us at times. The best one was when we were in Prague and we were playing Dukla Prague and we had won 3-1 at home, and a prominent English commentator was there doing the game for BBC, and we had through in a no-scoring draw which took us to the final, the first British team. And the commentator came running down saying, we've done it, we've done it. So it was a good laugh for us all that day, that rather than us become one of his crowd. He became one of us, so that was very important for us. But it's not important now not to be accepted. I think that when we go to England or anywhere, we know that they show us a lot of respect.
Celtic's a big club with a big name, and if he's got useful players and he trains them the right way and he gets them all to do what they can do, well, if he gets them all to do well, the little things they can do, and he merges them all together, it's a form of socialism, without the politics, of course.
Big Jock's instrumental for bringing the club right into the 20th century and making it the club that it is today. There's no doubt about that whatsoever.
Jock Stein is a man who's got the blood of Bruce in his veins, That's my opinion of him. I mean, he's unafraid of anything.
His courage brought him back from a horrific car smash in which he and his friend Tony Queen nearly died. Sean Fallon was caretaker manager for a season. In 1976-77, Jock Stein was back.
Well, that's McDonald in, and it's in no. It's a penalty kick. The referee has awarded a penalty kick. What a nerve-wracking moment for Kennedy.
Celtic's victory over Rangers in the Scottish Cup final gave Jock Stein the double. His teams had won 9 league titles in a row with unmistakable style.
When he made football teams play as he did, it was because he had a knowledge of the anguish of life, if you like. Although his teams played with great joy, it was probably the most conspicuous aspect of their approach to the game was, as I've said earlier, verve. He was a big man in the sense of being a very big spirit. Terrific intelligence, terrific perception, terrific sense of practicality about how romantic ideas of football could be made to work through sometimes very ordinary wee guys from the sort of places we were brought up in, but a huge spirit.
And there is Kenny Dalglish getting his first cup victory as Celtic captain.
It was Jock Stein's last hurrah at Celtic Park. At the end of the 77-78 season, he would leave. If one picture is worth 1,000 words, put your own text to this one.
Most of those close to Jock think it was an offer that was going to remain an offer and not become a fact. I'm in no position to judge the realities of that, and I'm certain there were many other elements in what happened back in that very grim time. When I talk about it, I just think back to how much it devastated Jock.
It was time up for Jock Stein at Parkhead. Whatever lay behind the sadness of his going, he approved of Billy McNeill as his successor. His approval was justified by immediate results.
I remember when I came back as manager and we beat Rangers 4-2 to win the title that year. I mean, the dressing room was full of ex-players who were just as delighted as the players today. And I find that happens. Ex-players are so happy for the success that you get. It's terrific.
When you talk about following Jock Stein, clearly you're loading even the best of candidates with too many millstones, too many disadvantages. The choice of Billy McNeill, I think, is excellent. Billy was very important to Jock. Jock said to me he said, the Celtic that I created would not have existed without Billy McNeill. Billy McNeill was absolutely a cornerstone.
McNeill remained the cornerstone as manager. His combination of inherited and acquired players continued to challenge for titles.
Well away by Dawson. Yes, Nedden. Come for side. Still not clear. Danny McGrain. Oh, that's a goal! McCluskey got the touch from that shot. There was a deflection.
The joy of winning was marred by events after the match. The dinosaur of sectarianism arrived to spoil the party, and mounted policemen replaced the players on the pitch. People were wondering when the Scottish Cup would stop brimming with bigotry.
I think the religious thing's not a good thing. I mean, that's out the window and that. And I think if Rangers signed Catholics, there'd still be the same hatred. It would take away the religious bigotry possibly, but there'd still be the same hatred. And I don't think you can have football without the hatred. I mean, that's what makes the Celtic Rangers game the greatest club game in the world.
But it's a hobby. It doesn't really mean anything. I had a wee pal in Scotland, and he would say, he'd be talking about someone, he'd say, oh, so-and-so, aye, yeah, what else do you expect? He's a Catholic. And I would say, oh, come on, get a grip. They'd say, oh, no, he wasn't like you, Billy. He was a right Catholic. And I've never understood what this meant. But they've got little divisions, you know. But I think, as I said, it's a hobby. And they keep it for 90 minutes. And they seethe and roar and they let off some steam. They don't carry it on through the week. Because I've worked beside guys who were real rivals on a Saturday and pals all week. I've also worked beside guys who took it a wee bit seriously. But they need treatment.
Meanwhile, back at the football, Celtic in 1981 were defeating Dundee United 3-2 to clinch their 32nd league title.
On a curling, that's a neat touch in the end. Mugabe with the final touch. Reads wide on the left. Burns was screaming for a good run by Burns. Must put it away, it does. Not bad to win a championship with a support like that. And this is an important constituent in Celtic's success.
The loyalty of the fans was rewarded with performances like Celtic's 7-0 demolition of Motherwell in 1982.
He's done it! No off, straight forward, 6 goal. Cara can't get it away, goes Aiken to get it off. It's 2 against 1, would you believe? And Mugabe, Nicholas, is he going to be unselfish? Is he taking it himself? He is!
The traditional Celtic flair was still there, but compounded with a strange new ingredient. Charlie Nicholas, brilliant footballer and male model, typified something that was becoming more common in the Scottish game. The skills the players demonstrated in the field needn't be identified with any particular club. They could be a commodity for sale to the highest bidder. It was an understandable attitude, but one that cut across the traditional values of Celtic. The old principle of the footballer as club patriot that had sustained Celtic for so long was being challenged by the new principle of the footballer as mercenary.
Well, it's not for me to say what I'm worth, because I mean I couldn't do that, because like so, the transfer fees and that were about proportion anyway. I think obviously because I scored a lot of goals, it's not because I'm a better player than anybody else, but I scored more goals than some people did, and it's caused a lot of concern because they want to buy me and I scored maybe 50 goals.
The more the goals came, the greater the risk was of the players going.
Robin, a good position for Celtic, and that's a goal! Nicholas has done it! Robin to take it. Second chance. McClellan down, and that's it! Robin McLeod, number 2.
Celtic's 9th League Cup victory declared that whatever else was happening, the quality of the play stayed high.
He's aiming for goal himself this time, and a brilliant goal!
But unrest wasn't restricted to the players. Denied the contract he asked for, Billy McNeill left the club he had served for so long. In 1983 he moved to Manchester City and was replaced, typically enough, by another fine former Celtic player and a man with previous managerial experience. Davy Hay took over at Celtic Park. He too was to achieve success. In 1985, the team was captained to cup victory by Danny McGrain, a player reminiscent of an older Celtic breed, 20 years with the club, a record comparable to that of one of the earlier players, Alec McNair.
Only twice in the history of the Scottish Cup have goals been scored direct from a free kick. Is this a bit of history? It is! David Provan! Haggerty, here's Aiken. Good drifting ball, it's there, McIlvanney!
Danny McGrain has been probably the outstanding Celtic player in the 10-12 years I've been here. Got incredible admiration for him as a footballer, and for his strength that he's had so many serious injuries and fought back, and he was probably the guy that achieved a level of consistency that I've never seen before in any Celtic player. Until now, Paul McStay's probably getting there.
Paul McStay.
In 1986, in order to win the league title, Celtic needed to beat St Mirren by 3 goals and for Hearts to lose to Dundee. Hearts lost 2-0.
Absolutely magnificent. No question about it. Celtic are certainly playing like champions. Archdeacon testing Tom Wilson. Makes his way to the byline. Here's Gordon McLeod now. McStay. 4-0 to Celtic. One trying to play Celtic offside. It failed. Here's Johnstone. Now Gordon McLeod. The clear.
Celtic won the league, helped by the skills of Brian McClare, for 4 seasons in a row top goal scorer with the club. But the following year, Davy Hay was gone, and Billy McNeill was surprisingly back at Parkhead. It was an old job, but a new challenge. He came back to a Scottish game transformed by the fact that chief rivals Rangers had bought themselves a formidable team. In Celtic's centenary season, the traditional methods were under pressure. McNeill had to hope that his own new, less expensive signings would come good fast.
There's a nice dummy. Billy Stark has scored.
I've never been so nervous in all my career as I was that morning. My wife will verify that. I just was snapping back at her all morning. So to get the goal so early in the game played a large part in helping the Celtic support to accept me, having played against them all these years.
The one thing that had stayed utterly the same at Celtic Park was the paramount importance of the fans.
I've been fortunate enough that I've had a fairly good relationship with the fans over the years. And it does help. I mean, it does help your confidence. It helps you to relax in the park. And it's been said umpteen times that the fans are worth a goal of a start to us. No doubt about it. The first sight you get is support when you come down through the tunnel. And it's the jungle, probably the most famous part of the stadium. And I mean, when that's full, there's no better sight in the world.
This is the holy ground here, you know, and it always will be. You may graduate to the stand, or even worse, they may put you in the director's box, but you can't even stand up when they score a goal or anything. This is where it all happens. Everybody over there wishes they were in.
I don't think there's a better sight in football when you see the Celtic support showing all the colours right around the terrace. I don't think there's anything better than football. And what it does for the players is dramatic. I mean, it gives you the extra impetus just when you need it. I mean, it makes you run that wee bit faster. Particularly when things were going wrong and maybe you were a goal behind. That's when that added ingredient came out.
You can't get it in. It's gone in. Mark McGee.
In the Hearts game, the semi-final, when we pulled it back to 1 each, there was, I think, a free kick at the halfway line though, and maybe a lot of teams would have settled, and maybe some of our minds were not settled 1 each. We'll go for a replay, and then you heard this voice for the back, "Come on, we can do it," no, and that was it. No, the man is tremendous.
Billy Stark. Bonnick does save. It's a tantalising one. Goals given. Walker is getting the congratulations.
It's an amazing thing about Celtic. They seem to do it not only at the 11th hour, but at the most dramatic time. What is this about?
This is a new thing. I mean, there are people here saying, "Oh, it's all right, there's a minute and a half to go." Settling down. And this is a very new thing, but all I think it is the manifestation of 90 minutes, don't let go.
That determination was crucial in gaining the 1988 league title. McNeill's achievement wasn't just that once again he had brought Celtic success against the odds, but that he had done it with players who weren't simply mercenaries. They played for the money, it was true, but they retained some of the pride that had started the team. The hallmark of their performance was commitment to the club.
The easiest thing is to buy players and go and look at players and just bring them to the club, and from whatever background. I like to bring players to the club that can quickly have a feeling and get a feeling for Celtic if they haven't already got that. I think the success that we had this season goes down to the fact that these players feel very, very strong for the club, and they have got this good Celtic feeling about them.
He's a great manager, he's a great motivator, and he's got a tremendous will to win, and that rubs off on the rest of the players. He's the most successful manager I've ever played under. The last spell he was here, he won 3 championships, a Scottish Cup and a League Cup, and already he's back and we've won the league and hopefully the cup.
It's a grand team to play for, but it's a grand team to see. It's enough to make your hearts go nay, nay, no, no.
They knew the history, those fans who followed Celtic to Hampden, and those who, unable to get tickets, gathered together to watch on television. They were part of the same tradition. The descendants of the original Celtic fans weren't just coming to see the cup final, but to reaffirm the conviction that lay behind the club's foundation, that they had cause for pride and that they belonged where they were, as part of Scotland. They arrived, as they always have done, like a crucial 12th man in the team, determined to will the players into achieving the result they wanted.
Celtic in the centenary year. Dundee United 21 years younger. Almost an instant-wide comparison. Different styles. Or McStay. It's more like McStay. McIlvanney, and that must be just pushed away.
Football doesn't always obey the will of the fans.
Well, I shouldn't have got into that position. Kevin Gallacher. Free kick. And Gallacher really badly down there. Bannon taking it. Well, he found the gap all right. Gallacher, goal!
Even one goal down well into the second half, players and fans maintained belief in themselves.
Right to the far side, here's Rogan. That's a better one, it's equaliser. McIlvanney.
There's something magical definitely about it, especially this year, the centenary year. It's just been one dream from start to finish. Everything's going so well, but you knew everything was going to go well. There was something inside you that told you, you know, 3 minutes to go in the semi-final, and then, in the cup final as well. You just knew we were going to do it.
We're in for the final minute. The lower one this time, and McIlvanney.
One of the interesting mysteries of Celtic is how a group of people, fans and players and management, can bring their passion and commitment and skill to the most unpredictably fluid ball game in the world and oblige it to agree with their sense of themselves. 1988 has justified 1888. But season 1987-88 is already the past, and it is in the nature of football always to be preparing for the next game. The past is the place from which we learn. From there we can equip ourselves with the right attitudes, the example of others, a proper commitment. Celtic has a proud tradition, but the battle is always in the present and pushing towards the future.
I think the biggest and most important aspect is to set our horizons on re-establishing the great European reputation that we had in the 60s and early 70s. We've got to recreate that and start to get results in Europe again, start to get runs in the European competitions. That's very, very important to us. And obviously we've got to use this season as a base for restructuring very, very strongly for the future.
the great things they do in the future, because they are unquestionably one of the outstanding clubs in the game.
No matter who's going to be here in the next 100 years, to be still looking for the same sort of achievements, which is great. Most of the fans, kids, you could say, will be sort of old timers then, and they'll be able to tell about the year that we won the league in the centenary year. So hopefully the team that will be playing in 100 years from now will emulate the team that done things now.
Celtic will always want to play in a way that entertains their fans, certainly always trying to win the game in as convincing a fashion as possible, and I think that that's what really attracts Celtic supporters to Celtic Park, the fact that they're coming to see a somewhat cavalier approach to football, and people who are really trying to play football in a sense that expresses the better aspects of the game, and I think that's what the people love, and I think they'll always love that as long as we play it that way.
Celtic will hopefully always play the same exciting football of commitment to the jerseys, but there could be problems. The spirit of the entrepreneur who identifies with no particular place has come into Scottish football, as it has regrettably come into other aspects of Scottish life. The homegrown talent that spends most of a football career with one club may become rarer. The background to football is changing. It is hard to imagine a successful repetition of Jock Stein's methods in the 1980s or 90s. If Celtic is to maintain its traditions, it may have to adapt them. Its greatest strength in trying to do so and yet keep its identity will be the continuing loyalty and belief in the team of its fans. They made the club. They will help it to remain itself. Jock Gallagher, who has won a cup of his own as Celtic's greatest supporter, speaks for the crowd.
My ambition is to do another 9 in a row. That's my ambition. 8 to go. So it's up to a man up there in Billy. I'm not here but Billy.
Whatever you feel about its past or think about its future, Celtic is part of the fabric of Scottish life, woven from the contributions of many people. It looks likely to remain so. The story so far, the story continues.